I'm reviewing today Batman Knightfall Volume 3, Knightsend. Now, as that title, Volume 3, implies, this is in fact the third volume of the Batman Knightfall trilogy. These are all collected editions of comics, which were originally just published as separate issues on the newsstands back in 1993 and 1994. The basic storyline here, if you're not familiar, is a replacement storyline. So, in Volume 1 of Knightfall, the original Batman, Bruce Wayne, is crippled by Bane. He gets his back broken, he is incapacitated, and he has to pass the mantle of Batman onto a successor, who is Jean-Paul Valley, also known as Azrael the Avenging Angel. And then for about half a year, Azrael was the Batman in the Batman comics. He was a much more violent and aggressive Batman than Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne, meanwhile, went on to recover from his injury, and when he recovered, he came back to reclaim the mantle of the Batman, appalled by how Jean-Paul Valley, aka Azrael, had tarnished the mantle of the Batman in the meantime by being too aggressive and violent. However, Azrael is not going to give up the mantle of the Batman without a fight. And so Bruce Wayne, aided by his allies, Dick Grayson, aka Nightwing, and Tim Drake, aka Robin, have to take on Azrael and fight him to reclaim the mantle of Batman. Which, spoilers, he eventually does defeat Azrael and reclaims the mantle. And the story really should end here, except this edition, and this is the 2012 edition, actually goes on to include the subsequent storyline, which appeared in Batman comics at that time, which is Batman Prodigal, as in the prodigal son. So this is when Dick Grayson, aka the first Robin, assumes the mantle of Batman, and for the next 10 issues, Dick Grayson is actually filling in as Batman while Bruce Wayne goes off and completes his recovery. It's a chronological continuation of what happened to these characters in the series, but it is very obviously a completely new and different story arc. And so, by all rights, it really doesn't belong in this collection, but I'm not going to complain. I'm glad they included it. And in fact, I've got some nostalgia for this storyline, as I'll explain in a bit. I've reviewed previously on this channel volumes 1 and volumes 2 of the Knightfall trilogy, and I'll link to my reviews in the description down below in case you missed them. But yeah, there is a little bit of a confusing thing here with different editions of these books. I guess according to Wikipedia, there was editions which were published in the 90s, and then editions which were published in 2012. Somewhat confusingly, if you're ordering these on Amazon, both editions seem to be currently available for order as new books. So it appears that even though there's a 2012 edition, they did not cease publication of the original volumes. So they appear to be on sale both at the same time. So if you're ever ordering books for your school library like I am, and you're going through Amazon, just be careful about which editions you're going to buy. Otherwise, you might miss part of the story. The 2012 editions are longer. They're all about 600 pages. So I think just to keep these editions longer is the reason that they included the subsequent story arc in this collection. And so the Batman Knightfall Knightsend, where Batman has to fight to reclaim his mantle from the interloper Jean-Paul Valley, that actually ends halfway through this book, page 298, and we still have another 340 pages left to go of story. And again, no complaints about that. I was reading comics at the time that these were on the newsstands. I've talked about my history with comic books a few times on this channel already, so forgive me for repeating myself. But I was always interested in superheroes, as all young kids are. But my parents didn't allow me to have the comics, so I just absorbed them from TV. You know, the Super Friends cartoon show, Batman TV show, etc. And I didn't get mobility and disposable income with which to actually buy these comics until I was 15, 16 in high school. And so I had a couple years where I was buying these off the newsstands, and I had some of these issues. Now, the thing about Batman in the 1990s, and presumably still Batman today, is that the storyline was split across several different titles. So there was Batman, there was Detective Comics, there was Batman Shadow of the Bat, there was Batman Legends of the Dark Knight, there was Robin. Robin got spun off into his own comic book. There was Catwoman, which was another tie-in. So there were 6 titles across which these storylines could play out. Now, I actually had a subscription to Robin. It came in my mailbox once a month. But it would only be like 1/6 of the story, or because the story was playing across all those other titles. A few of these other issues I bought off the racks, but Robin was the only one I had a subscription to. I just couldn't afford to follow the whole story in real time. There were so many tie-in issues. Which is both the frustration of reading comics and the beauty of it. The thing that fascinated me as a kid, and I still find interesting now, is the idea of story as a tapestry. So instead of having a linear storyline, story is just bouncing across through all these issues and tie-ins and crossovers. But yeah, it does make it a little hard to kind of be a completist about these types of things. So when I was 15 and 16, I would get Robin in the mail once a month, and I would get glimpses of the larger story, but not until now do I have the whole collection. And in fact, even now, this isn't really the whole collection, because there are all these other tie-in books that go together. And, even in this collection, we have the Catwoman storyline, but Catwoman has her own storyline, which is tying into this, and we just kind of pick up Catwoman's story right in the middle as it crosses over here. So again, it's storytelling as tapestry, if you will. But yeah, I've got nostalgia for the issues I remember, and I appreciated seeing the issues that I never got to read until now. So, speaking of, let me back up a little bit here. Because of the way this edition is put together, where it has the conclusion of Knightsend and then goes directly into Prodigal, this edition is more than anything the storyline of Dick Grayson. So Dick Grayson shows up at the beginning of this volume. Let's see if I can find where he shows up. He shows up and he is back to help his old mentor, Bruce Wayne, the Batman. But he is also hurt that Bruce Wayne did not choose him to succeed him, and instead choosing Jean-Paul Valley, a programmed murderer and a newcomer in the Batman series at this point. So they team up. Nightwing joins in the battle with Robin and Batman to defeat John Paul Valley. And then after that, he takes on the mantle of Batman himself for the next 10 issues in Batman Prodigal, as in the prodigal son has returned. So I suppose I should talk about who Dick Grayson is so that this will all make sense. So Dick Grayson is the original Robin. He was Robin ever since the character was invented in like 1940, all the way up through when he retired from being Batman in 1984. So those were, of course, the prime years when these characters, Batman and Robin, were being established in the popular consciousness. You know, the Super Friends TV show, the Batman TV show in the 1960s, the movies, etc. So to this day, people who only know Batman from popular media will know that Dick Grayson is Robin. Now, I didn't actually read these issues myself, but according to Wikipedia, Dick Grayson, the Dick Grayson Robin began to be separated from the Batman as early as the 1970s. In the 1960s, of course, Batman was kind of more of a cartoonish character. But after the TV show ended, there was a move to get Batman to return to his more somber origins, you know, the Dark Knight. And so there was a move to separate him from Robin, and so Dick Grayson was aged up to a college student and went away to college, where he would only intermittently appear in the Batman comics. And he actually went off to have his own adventures in comic books like the Teen Titans. Then, with the Teen Titans becoming a very popular title in the 1980s, Dick Grayson retired the mantle of Robin and assumed his own identity as Nightwing, where he's got, where's a good picture of it? The yellow and kind of dark blue mantle here. Costume here was Nightwing's signature look, which opened up the slot for a new Robin to appear. And that new Robin was Jason Todd, who was very unpopular with readers, proved to be very unpopular with readers, so much so that he was eventually killed off in what I believe was 1988 in the issue Batman Death in the Family, which, if you weren't alive back then, it received it received some amount of media attention at the time. Not nearly as much as later comic book events like the death of Superman would later receive, but it received some media attention. I remember I was in 4th grade at the time. I wasn't allowed to actually own or read comic books, but you know, the kids in the 4th grade were talking about it. Did you hear they're killing off Robin? They're actually going to kill off Robin. And I was horrified at the time. I mean, I wasn't reading comic books, but I knew who Robin was from the Super Friends TV show and the Batman TV show. And I actually liked Robin. I know nowadays it's cool to say, like, oh, Robin sucks, Batman's much cooler alone. But, you know, Robin was a kid sidekick character that was designed to appeal to kids. And as a kid, he appealed to me. I was one of those kids who liked having a young sidekick to identify with in the superhero comics. I mean, I guess there's a reason why child sidekicks or teen sidekicks were so popular in the superhero comic books once upon a time. But that actually wasn't Dick Grayson that was getting killed off. That was Jason Todd. I didn't realize that at the time. because the media didn't report it as Jason Todd getting killed off. It just reported it as Robin getting killed off. And if you weren't actually reading comics, you wouldn't actually know that that was the second Robin, because that was only something comic book readers know. According to Wikipedia, it said, because of the way Batman Death in the Family was reported, people who weren't actively reading comic books thought it was the original Robin. Apparently, this was something that happened to a lot of people. Certainly happened to me. And I did not find out that Dick Grayson had actually survived until I started reading comic books myself in the early 90s. Now, when I got into comic books in the early 90s, sorry, I'm still going on this digression talking about my history with these comics. I had a limited budget, but fortunately for me, there was the bargain bin at my local comic book shop where you could buy 3 comic books for $1. And they, for whatever reason, at my local shop, had tons of back issues of the Teen Titans in their bargain bin. Now, I'd never heard of the Teen Titans before this, which may sound a little bit strange nowadays, because I think since the 90s, the Teen Titans have been made into multiple different TV shows. There's like a live action TV show, and I think there were like 2 popular cartoon series. And then there was Young Justice, if we count Young Justice as a Teen Titan TV show. But that was all post-2000. In the 1990s, the Teen Titans were not in television or movies. They were only in comics. So if you didn't read comics, if you were only familiar with superheroes through TV and movies, you wouldn't know about Teen Titans, and you wouldn't know about any of the Teen Titans story. And I did not know anything, but I bought all these back issues. For whatever reason, almost the whole run of the Teen Titans through the 1980s was in the bargain bin here. Partially because they did cheap reprints of the Teen Titans in the 80s. They had like the main title, but then there's also Tales of the Teen Titans, which was reprinting the same stories a year later on cheaper paper. So those of course were all in the bargain bin. From there, I learned that Dick Grayson, after he stopped being Robin, went on to become Nightwing. And I was like, oh, cool. He didn't die after all. He's still around having adventures with the Teen Titans. If you've not read them yet, the Teen Titans run with Marv Wolfman and George Perez during the 1980s was great. Of course, I say that. I haven't reread those issues for years, but loved them at the time. Really enjoyed reading about the continued adventures of Dick Grayson, who was not actually dead. Meanwhile, in Batman comic books, after Jason Todd got killed off, the mantle of Robin went to Tim Drake, who was the 3rd Robin. So, all of that is a long way of saying that I actually really like the character of Dick Grayson, and had been belatedly following his adventures in the Teen Titans through all those back issues. Got a subscription to the Titans in 93 or 94. It was no longer called the Teen Titans at the time. It was just called the Titans. However, unfortunately for me, I subscribed to the Titans at exactly the wrong time, because 93, 94 was when that series was going down the toilet because of a lot of reasons. Dick Grayson had a long romance with Starfire, his girlfriend on the Titans, or the Teen Titans. That all fell apart in issue 100 and following. There was a few issues following where Dick Grayson did some soul searching in the pages of the New Titans, but then he ended up leaving the issue. leaving the series. Just about the time I subscribed to it, and then the rest of the series went downhill until it was canceled. It later got revived, of course, near the end of the 90s, but for the middle of the 90s, then the Titans comic was no more. I didn't know this at the time, of course, but looking at Wikipedia now, Wikipedia says that the reason Dick Grayson left the Titans at that time was because the Batman editorial team wanted him. Apparently, they were able to pull rank, maybe because the Titans' sales were not doing well at the time. So he exits the Titans, and then he shows up here in the Batman comics. Now, in the Titan comics, I believe this was issues like 102, 103, 104 of the Titan comics. Dick Grayson, right before he exited, was doing some soul searching about how he had been distant from his mentor figure, the Batman Bruce Wayne, for so long. And there was hints of reconciliation. The relationship between them had been strained for several years. It was definitely the impression I got. Now, keep in mind, I haven't read everything. I mean, it's almost impossible to have read everything. And also keep in mind, I'll make one more disclaimer here. Although I read all the back issues of the Teen Titans, or most of them, I did not read the back issues of the Batman comics, because the Batman comics were not in the bargain bin. And I guess that speaks to the popularity of Batman as a character, or maybe how much people viewed these as collectibles. But for whatever reason, you could not find the back issues of Batman very easily. Those were very difficult to get. People were, I guess, hoarding their old issues of Batman. So I don't really have a clear idea of what was going on in the Batman titles in the 1980s or early 90s preceding this storyline. Was Dick Grayson showing up in Batman comics sporadically throughout that time? Was he getting on with Batman well? Certainly the impression you got from Teen Titans is that Dick Grayson wanted to be his own man. He wanted to be independent, and he somewhat resented the overbearingness of his adoptive father, the Batman, Bruce Wayne. But those issues in the New Titans 102 or 103, 104, he was realizing that he was actually his father's son, and he was how much he was shaped by the Batman, the Bruce Wayne. And people were writing in letters. I remember reading the letters in the letter column at the time, getting really emotional about it, saying, I've been pleading with DC Comics for years to reconcile this relationship. I'm so glad that they're finally reconciled. That was over in the pages of the New Titans. But then when Dick Grayson actually comes back to the pages of Batman to actually assume the mantle of Batman, I think it had kind of the same sort of emotional resonance to it. And the story line concludes over here with Bruce Wayne coming back, and interspersed with pages of Robin fighting this winged supervillain. Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson kind of have it out, yelling at each other, getting their emotions out before having this reconciliation here. But that's the way it always is, isn't it? I don't know what you mean, the way that always is between fathers and sons. Sorry, I started that quote at the wrong place. It says, look, This is the part I'm not good at. You've reached an age where you couldn't be the boy wonder anymore. You outgrew it. A distance grew between us. I left so many things unsaid. I handled it all wrong. But that's the way it always is between fathers and sons. So they're acknowledging that they are father and son and that they do care for each other. And that was, I think, at the time regarded as a emotional moment for fans of these characters. I stopped reading comic books shortly after that for maybe reasons I'll get into a little bit more down in this review. But I'm under the impression that despite the sense of finality you get from this storyline and from that moment, that was not the last of the strained relationship between Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson. In fact, in 2006, I got a paperback novel, DC Comics Inheritance by Devin Grayson, which was DC was getting into writing novels this time about their characters, in which was also about the strained relationship between Dick Grayson and the Batman. And that was in 2006. And I remember thinking to myself, they're still doing this. They're still having this storylines about how Dick Grayson is reconciling himself to his mentor. They were doing this like 10 years ago. And as far as I know, they're still doing it. I think, it might be like one of those Lois Lane and Superman type things, where no matter how many decades go by, they're just kind of hitting the same notes over with those characters. So Lois Lane and Superman are always kind of falling in love and then overcoming difficulties in their romance. And then maybe Dick Grayson and Bruce Wayne, Robin and the Batman, the former Robin and the Batman, are always perpetually reconciling themselves to the fact that even though Dick Grayson has outgrown his mentor now and is independent, that they still have this relationship. I don't know. Like I said, I haven't been reading comic books much for the past 20 years, but at any rate, that's the dynamic here. So, yeah, that's the overarching background to which these stories play out. Now, maybe let's jump in there and get into this in a little bit more detail. So we start off with Bruce Wayne, who is now back. He has recovered from his back injury, but he's out of training. He spent the last several months in a wheelchair, and even though he's made a recovery from the paralysis, he still doesn't have the muscle memory left to do all the flips and jumps and things. So he gets Lady Shiva to agree to train him. Now, Lady Shiva, I don't know much about. Apparently, according to Wikipedia, she started off in one of the Kung Fu comics in the 1970s, but has since become associated as a Batman villain. She is portrayed as a killer who just loves to kill for the sport of it. And she agrees to train Bruce Wayne just for the novelty of it. And Bruce Wayne agrees to go along with her because he thinks she's the only one who can help him in this situation. What's weird about this is, as a result of this training arrangement, tons of people are killed by Lady Shiva, in which Bruce Wayne is arguably indirectly responsible for a lot of their deaths. So the first thing is Lady Shiva kills this old master. And then the plan is that his seven disciples will come to avenge his death. He does not appear to be any sort of supervillain or something like that, just some sort of kung fu master, presumably on the side of good or at least neutral. His students are trying to avenge his death, but they don't appear to be evil or supervillains. But as a result of coming in to avenge their deaths, first one Bruce Wayne defeats and brings to Lady Shiva, and then she kills him as punishment for failure. After that, he learns not to bring them to Lady Shiva anymore. But there's still all these fights in which several lives are getting placed in danger. Now, I would not draw attention to this ordinarily. I just accept it that, Batman lives in a dangerous world and there is collateral damage. Except the storyline in which this is taking place is making such a big deal about the fact that the replacement Batman, Jean-Paul Valley, allowed a man to die instead of saving him, which is the whole reason that they're fighting over the mantle of the Bat here. The mantle of Batman is because Jean-Paul Valley, when fighting, what was his name? The Abattoir, chose not to save him and let the Abattoir fall. In a moment of what was portrayed in that issue as like a moment of weakness or confusion. So given that such a big deal is made up of the fact that Batman never kills, Batman can't be responsible for any deaths, it seems like a weird juxtaposition to have Bruce Wayne be indirectly responsible for all these deaths and endangerment, just as he's getting his training back. I don't know if I should credit the writers with a sense of irony here, if some of that is intentional. Don't think it is, but I don't think the irony is intentional, but I could be wrong. Anyways, once Batman has completed his training, then we move in to the end game where there's a showdown with Azrael, who's the current Batman. So Batman fighting Batman. I don't know if anyone remembers this, but in my review of Knightfall Volume 2, I complained a little bit that the action was episodic. That the stories were episodic, and that the action was disappointing. There were a few panels of fighting at the end of each story, but it was largely just kind of very short episodic stories with unsatisfying climaxes. But this is a satisfying climax. I mean, this certainly shows that this medium is capable of very thrilling action scenes. So there's a showdown with Azrael, and there's a bunch of bad guys that there's a bunch going on. Catwoman's trying to get the device from these bad guys. Azrael is trying to get revenge for his father on the bad guys. Nightwing and Dick Grayson are caught in the middle fighting the bad guys, where Bruce Wayne is fighting Azrael. And then there's swinging from a helicopter. And the whole story just, even though it's spread across multiple issues, just seems to keep increasing in intensity in a way that the visuals, the momentum of the action, the intensity of the action, I just thought it was a very exciting several issues. So it does go to show that in spite of what I said in my previous video when I was reviewing Volume 2, the medium actually can lend itself to some very exciting action sequences. And then even this is kind of like the first issue after the original Batman comes back. This is one of the ones that came in my mailbox back in the day, and I remember how happy I was to see the original iconic Batman back in the story. This is one of the episodic stories in which a bunch of thieves take over a museum and hold people hostage, and Batman and Robin have to sneak in. But even though it's a short little story, the pacing here is good. You get the sense of them gradually sneaking around, kind of building in suspense until the Batman finally appears. So even in some of the episodic stories, it can be quite interesting or quite well paced. Then we get to there's a couple issues wrapping up that storyline, and then we get to the prodigal storyline where Dick Grayson takes over the mantle of Batman. It says, I can't leave Gotham without a Batman, but I can't make an error in judgment like last time. I don't think you have to worry about... I don't think you have anything to worry about, Bruce, this time. You made the right choice. I can't replace you, Bruce, but I'd be lying if I said it's not going to be Wild standing in for you. Sorry about stumbling over that a little bit. It's having difficulty reading through my phone screen here. But yeah, you get the idea. Now, it's not really explained. This kind of comes out of nowhere. I don't know if this is explained in the tie-in issue that doesn't appear. Why Bruce Wayne is going away for a bit, other than he says he needs time to recover. Presumably what Bruce Wayne was doing during this time probably appears in some other tie-in issues. But we just get rather abruptly, Bruce is leaving again. Dick Grayson is filling in. Oh, something I forgot to mention. This is a minor point, but for whatever reason, at this point in the early 90s, everybody in the DC universe started growing mullets. So Dick Grayson had a mullet here, depending on who the artist is. Let me see if I can find a good picture. Depending on who the artist is, it can be kind of like a long ponytail, or sometimes it appears as maybe a shorter mullet. And I call it mullet because it's only long in the back. It was short up in the front. This hairstyle, as somebody who lived through this time, I don't remember this hairstyle being all that popular in real life at the time, but one of the editors at DC Comics or something like that must have been quite taken with this as the new cool way that the kids were looking. Because not only Nightwing grew out the mullet, but Beast Boy, also in the Teen Titans at the time, or the New Titans at that time, grew out the mullet. Superman, after he came back from the dead in the pages of DC Comics, was sporting a mullet. So they've got the long hair here, which disappears completely when he puts on the Batman suit. I guess it must be hidden under the mask. I always thought that the Batman, that even at the time, even before mullets became quite the joke that they were, I always thought it was a little bit silly a little bit of a silly look, or a little bit of a ratty look of the mullet. Oh, hey guys, Daddy's a little busy right now.
Daddy, read a book.
Yeah, he's just making a video. Do you want to go find Mommy? Yep. All right. Good night, guys. And certainly in the years since then, the mullet look has not aged well. It's become a joke. Although I will say that without that mullet, there is very little to distinguish Dick Grayson from Bruce Wayne. In the issues of Teen Titans before Dick Grayson grew out the mullet, there were a couple issues where he would talk to Bruce Wayne, and they were both portrayed as kind of young men with, I don't know, kind of hawk noses and clear eyes, and kind of brown hair, which was often colored kind of bluish. They really. I remember some issues where they were both in them. This was during the 80s, before Dick Grayson had the mullet, and they, once Dick Grayson was aged up to being in his 20s, it was very hard to kind of tell them apart. They both had a very similar look, so at least with the long hair here, it's something to distinguish him. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. What was I going to say? Oh, yeah. So he's got the rather silly ponytail here, the Dick Grayson character. But then once he puts on the Batman mask, it's essentially just looks like Batman. And I think if I have a complaint about this, it's that even though we know that it's Dick Grayson behind the mask for these issues, it still just kind of looks like generic Batman. I think one thing that was true in some of the new Titans issues, or the Teen Titans issues, is Dick Grayson's, his backstory is he was a circus acrobat. His parents were acrobats. Oh yeah, here's a classic example, huh? Looks exactly like Bruce Wayne, huh? Because he can't, but it's actually Dick Grayson. The artists just draw them very similar. Anyways, I was talking about the circus acrobats. So in a lot of the Titans adventures, you would show him showing off that acrobatic background. He'd be doing like a bunch of flips through the air, leap up in the air and do like a flying kick that would land in the bad guy's chest or something like that. And not all of them, but in a lot of them. And I was thinking one of the ways maybe you could distinguish that this is Dick Grayson as the Batman now, and not Bruce Wayne, is to show him doing more of that acrobatic stuff. And there are a few flips and somersaults and stuff like that in here, but not much. It's pretty much just Batman doing Batman stuff. So, yeah, what's the point of having Dick Grayson be Batman if it's just going to be generic Batman? Well, they are doing some stuff here. There's a few issues here where he's getting worn down by the job, and he's wondering how you just keep fighting night after night, but then it's just an unending battle against crime. Some of these issues here where there's only one Batman. It wasn't Jean-Paul Valley, and it isn't me. Come back, Bruce. The night needs you. All I can do is curse the bat eclipsing my heart. So we do have that storyline, kind of. It doesn't really go anywhere, and it's some of these issues is emphasized more than others, but I guess we're doing that a bit. The other thing, for some of these middle issues in the storyline, the confrontation is against Two-Face. And Dick Grayson, we find out, is traumatized by fighting Two-Face because when he was Robin, when he was a new Robin, he slipped up, he made some sort of mistake, and a man died as a result of it, as he keeps having flashbacks to. This was a traumatizing thing. Now, the actual event here, I don't know exactly what they're referring to. I think this might be a retcon. Maybe like one of these post-crisis things that got retconned. So I don't know if this is established elsewhere in Batman continuity or if this is just something new they made up for this issue. But at any rate, it's established that he has a backstory with Two-Face, that he slipped up and a man died, and since then he's been haunted by that failure. I'm flipping through now to see if I can find any panels where they do the flashback to that. But I can't find anything right now. I guess you'll have to take my word for it at the moment. But so the yeah, here he is. Here is the flashback. So thinking about his early running with Two-Face, where he made the mistake. A man died back then because I wasn't ready to be Robin. He was too slow, or he made the wrong decision, and somebody innocent died, and has been haunting him ever since. Now, this is another thing that I think is a little bit silly, because throughout this, it's established over and over again that he's so haunted by the fact that a man died because he wasn't ready to be Robin. But throughout this confrontation with Two-Face, and throughout his entire time being Batman, people are dying left, right, and center. I mean, you know what Gotham City is like in these comic books. So he's constantly kind of arriving right after somebody got blown up, or a whole bunch of people are getting shot, killed, and then he arrives to kind of clean up the mess. So it's like I was talking about earlier in the video with that thing where Bruce Wayne was training with Lady Shiva and indirectly causing lots of death, even though the whole reason for this plot line is he was so haunted by a death that had occurred under Jean-Paul Valley's watch. This also doesn't make sense to me. He's so haunted by this one death that occurred when he was fighting Two-Face years ago. Although, yeah, there are plenty more deaths that are occurring throughout these pages. And, you know, some of them are deaths that you think, oh, if he had just been a few seconds quicker, could have prevented some of these deaths. So the contrast between the body toll in these pages and how he's so bent out of shape, or so haunted by that one death, strikes me as a little bit silly. But there you go. As we work through these issues at the end of the storyline, I do find, like I said before in my review of Volume 2, there are character moments and there are subplots that are progressing throughout this, but we are, at the same time, the genre is limited to kind of a villain of the week type thing, where you think to yourself, okay, this is all right, but I remember why I grew out of it. I mean, I don't know. I know there are plenty of people who read comic books into their 20s and 30s, and I guess I'm reading a comic book right now, so I guess maybe I'd have to count myself in that category of people who keep reading comic books into their 40s. But well, it is what it is, isn't it? It is what it is. It's fun to read to a certain extent, but it only offers you so much. The Batman fighting the villain of the week episode, with some subplots being advanced. Now, like I said, the beginning of the issue, in which there was this epic fight which took place of, I don't know, 3 or 4 issues, and which just kind of built in intensity. That was really good. But you know, if you're writing a weekly comic book, you can't do that every week, huh? You got to pace those big climaxes out with just the episodic stories. So yeah, the genre has its limitations, but on the whole, I really enjoyed this collection. And again, part of that is, like I said, I have my own nostalgia for it. You can see perhaps as I'm flipping through this that the art style varies drastically. This is Tom Grummett here, who I mentioned before was my favorite comic book artist at the time. I mean, look at that. His colors and his characters just pop with vibrancy. But because this is spread across 6 different titles, we've got a lot of different takes on these characters by a lot of different artists. And by the end of it, Tom Grummett has left the Robin book anyways, so we get a different artist on it. But a lot of good artwork on here, a lot of vibrant colors, a lot of fun. I very much enjoyed this on the whole, despite some of its faults. So, those are my faults on Batman Knightfall, Volume 3, Knightsend, the 2012 edition.